Welcome to Spiritual Minefield. Today we're going to look at, did Samson commit suicide? Stay tuned. Okay, so we're going to go to Judges chapter 13, and we're going to read when the angel of the Lord came to Samson's parents and told them that they were going to have a baby boy, and that he was going to be a Nazarite from birth. So we're going to pick up here in verse 5, and it says, "For behold, you will conceive and give birth to a son, and no razor shall come over his head, because a boy will be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he will begin the deliverance of Israel from the hand of the Philistines." So you see here the promise from God to his parents that Samson will start delivering the Israelites from the Philistines. That is God's goal through Samson. And we know that Samson wasn't perfect. He messed up a lot, but yet God's will be done. See, no one can stop the will of the Lord. So now let's go here to the end of Samson's life. This is Judges chapter 16. And Samson was captured by the Philistines because Samson gave himself to lust to Delilah. She betrayed him, of course. The Philistines found out his strength, which was his hair, because God says he can never cut his hair, since he disobeyed and told Delilah that his strength was in his hair, in the sense that as long as his hair is long, God will give him the strength to overcome the Philistines, and the Philistines could not touch Samson. So when he gave away his secret to Delilah, she told the Philistines while he was sleeping, and they cut off his hair. And because Samson told his secret to them and they cut off his hair, God left Samson because he disobeyed the Lord. Okay, so we're going to pick up on that, and we're going to see if Samson really committed suicide. So let's start here in verse 25. So here he is captured by the Philistines. They're gathered together in some type of stadium or something like that, and there's many Philistines there, and they want Samson to come out so that he could entertain them. So let's start here in verse 25, and it says, "And while their hearts were merry," referring to the Philistines, "they said, 'Call for Samson to entertain us.' So they called Samson out of the prison to entertain them, and they stationed him between the pillars. Samson said to the servant who held his hand, 'Lead me where I can feel the pillars supporting the temple, so I can lean against them.'" So here right off the bat, Samson already had a plan. He wanted to get vengeance and kill all the Philistines for what they did to him, for gouging out his two eyes. So his heart already was to kill the Philistines. Okay, so verse 27. "Now the temple was full of men and women. All the lords of the Philistines were there, and about 3,000 men and women were on the roof watching Samson entertain them. Then Samson called out to the Lord." Now, we see here that if a person is going to commit suicide and he calls out to God, God will not answer. We see that with King Saul. King Saul sought out the Lord, and God did not answer Saul because God abandoned Saul. Why? Because Saul rejected God. So then God left Saul. And then what happened at the end of Saul's life? He fell on his own sword, meaning he committed suicide. We see the same thing with Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus Christ. What did he end up doing? He ended up hanging himself and committing suicide. No one who is right with the Lord and maybe is going through difficulty will commit suicide. We see that with Elijah. Elijah was being hunted by Jezebel and her men. So what happened to Elijah? He wanted to die, but did he commit suicide? Absolutely not. He did not commit suicide. But we see two examples, Judas Iscariot, and we see King Saul, who both men got rejected and they committed suicide. So we see that as a difference, meaning that when you are about to kill yourself, or you have no more hope because you have rejected the Lord and the Lord has left you, when you call out to the Lord, he will not answer. But here Samson calls out to the Lord, and let's see if the Lord answers Samson. So let's start again in verse 28. "Then Samson called out to the Lord, 'O Lord God, please remember me. Strengthen me, O God, just once more, so that with one vengeful blow I may pay back the Philistines for my two eyes.' And Samson reached out for the two central pillars supporting the temple, bracing himself against them with his right hand on one pillar and his left hand on the other. Samson said, 'Let me die with the Philistines.'" So this is not a suicidal person. Why? Because look what he said earlier. He said in verse 28, so that with one vengeful blow, meaning to get his vengeance, I may pay back the Philistines for my 2 eyes. So this is retribution. This is vengeance for what the Philistines did to Samson. He wanted to destroy his enemies. So then what did he say? Samson said, let me die with the Philistines, meaning the only way Samson can kill his enemies if he dies in the process. So he was willing to sacrifice himself for his countrymen. Samson was willing to die for his people, but at the same time, he was getting vengeance for what the Philistines did to him. Then it says here, then continuing in verse 30, it says, then he pushed with all his might, and the temple fell on the lords and all the people in it. So in his death, he killed more than he had killed in his life. Then Samson's brothers and his father's family came down, carried him back, and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the temple of his father Manoah. And he had judged Israel 20 years. So you see here that Samson did not commit suicide. Samson wanted to get vengeance. And the only way he could get it is by destroying the temple and having the temple fall on the Philistines. But the part was that he was stuck in the temple. He couldn't get out. Now, why couldn't he get out? Because he was blinded. He could not see his way out. There's nothing he could do. So the only way he could kill his enemy if he dies in the process. That is not suicide. Suicide is when you lose all hope and you just kill yourself. That is suicide. But here we see that Samson wanted to get revenge on the Philistines and also save the Israelites. So this is very clear. Samson did not commit suicide. Samson killed his enemies. Thank you for listening.